will come to pass very, very shortly. Welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Hello and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. I am here with the wonderful former MEP, former head of the British National Party, and brilliant geopolitical analyst, certainly when it comes to the UK as well, and the man who stopped a war almost single-handedly with a letter, Nick Griffin. Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Warren. Good to be back.
It's lovely to have you with us again. Very, very simply, just going to get through the bits and pieces that we're going into here. Just your thoughts. We've got 4 or 5 topics that we'd like to cover. We've had the train stabbings. Now, what was your thoughts? Because obviously we've shown a video where he's gone into a barber's and attacked the barbers beforehand. And of course, there's been no response whatsoever from the police at that time. Is this something that is are they deliberately allowing this sort of thing to happen? Why is there so many stabbings and so many what I would call sort of semi-terror attacks or people with mental health issues, whatever you want to call? What's your thoughts on, first of all, what happened in Huntingdon? And secondly, it all seems rather as though it's being allowed to happen by the government and the police.
Well, what happened, I guess it was interesting that the police and the mass media took many, many hours to tell us that this was a British, black man. Obviously, they were trying to get see what the party line should be. So they've learned nothing from Southport, where their refusal to tell us something about the attacker and truth about the attacker actually made a lot of people just more and more angry. And it's remarkable that they haven't learned from that. So remarkable that, yes, I also do have to wonder, as you're saying, is it deliberate? Are they trying to wind us up? And in particular, are they trying to frighten us so that we accept, what they're really saying needs to come in as a result of this latest attack is scanners and all the rest of it on train stations as well as airports. So it's all part of the surveillance state they want to impose on us. At the same time, I think you can overestimate their cleverness, if not their evil, and also their competence. And I think that the reason that the police can't stop it is that nothing in this country works anymore. Why? Because the people who were trained in a time where they were trained for competence have now basically retired or are retiring. And we're now increasingly being run by a new generation who've been picked not for competence, not for what they can do, on account of who they are, whether they're one or other ethnic minority, whether they're a woman who's been pushed up the ranks of the police simply because they have to tick the boxes, it's ethnic minorities, police, lesbians, etc. And when you recruit people and especially promote people for what they are instead of what they do, you get automatically incompetence. When you dumb down the education system, as they've done for years now, you get just across the board incompetence. When you breed a population increasingly stupid, because over the last 50, 60 years, the cleverest people have had the fewest number of kids, while those sitting on their backsides sponging at the expense of the taxpayer, they've bred almost as many kids as is normal. So we've got more stupid people in the country and fewer clever people. You put all those things together, then add 1 more or 2 more factors in. Mass immigration from populations who are more prone to violence than we are, and that's the simple case here. We're seeing it over and over again, and from places which are violent as well in the case of the newcomers. And then you add in especially, and there seems to be something particular, well, perhaps it's not just the Africans actually, because you get it with the school shooters as well. Every single time you get one of these crazies, if you look into it, if they'll tell us, you will find they are heavy cannabis users. Now, this isn't the cannabis that when we were kids or youngsters and so on, everyone tried at university if you were remotely normal, because you had to pretend it was getting you high because it was so weak. The stuff, the skunk they're using now is a serious, poisonous, mind-destroying drug. And the common denominator on all these people, it's not Islam, this bloke isn't an Islamist, as far as we know. The common denominator with all of them is heavy cannabis use. Now, the other factor, perhaps, of course, is racial hatred of white people. But the fact he went into a Turkish barber's and attacked people there suggests it's not just that with him. Perhaps he's just plain bonkers. But isn't it suspicious how they haven't shown us any of the pictures of the victims yet, other than the hero who stepped in and so on, who's some kind of non-English decent fella? But they haven't shown us any of the pictures. I want to see the pictures, because if all the pictures of the victims on that train and the stabbing victims are white, then I would say what you've got here is yet another example of vicious anti-white racist hatred that the media and the politicians want to cover up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're talking about the cover-ups here, Nick, and it does seem to be the case here, it is almost as though there's a lot of people feeling like they're allowing this, and that we just hear lip service, where we're going to hear words like, "Oh, lessons have just been learned. This can't happen again. We won't have this, blah, blah, blah." And I think people are utterly sick of it, and they want action, but there seems to be a total, how can I put this? A total effort at inaction here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is. Well, for one thing, if people demand action of the politicians, let's get this straight. We've already had the action. Their action was to turn our once civilized, quiet, almost boring society into a multicultural utopia. And this is the consequence of their action. Now, they're not going to turn around and change it. Far from it. They want to push this on us further. And every time something crops up, which I think you've got to believe that the vast majority, even of the political elite, think that people being stabbed on a train is a bad thing. But nevertheless, the minute it happens, they're all there, especially the Labour Party types, leaping on it in order to use what's just happened and to use people's fears in order to promote their agenda. And there is no doubt whatsoever that the agenda of the entire ruling elite is GovCore, this combination of government and private corporations. And it's a GovCore with a totalitarian surveillance state, along with the CB, central bank digital currency, and all the rest of it. They want that, whether this is absolutely problem reaction solution or just wicked politicians jumping on a problem to exploit it. I'm not sure what percentage of each it is. In a way, it doesn't really matter. In either case, it's thoroughly evil.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we get to the politicians, I mean, it does seem as though there's absolutely no good politicians whatsoever anymore, Nick. There used to be, someone you could look at and go, yeah, it's good to have him in the House of Commons. I struggle to find one.
Well, yeah, I agree. Doesn't mean, of course, what you mean by good politician. I'm assuming that you're meaning good as in a good man or a good woman.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you're meaning a good politician in terms of a slick politician, then Nigel Farage is brilliant. There's no doubt about it. Now, is Nigel Farage a good man? I wouldn't say so. Does he exploit situations? Well, yes, but all politicians exploit situations because you have to get your agenda across. Is Nigel Farage going to come to power? On the present opinion polls and the present way things are going, I would say yes. Is Nigel Farage going to change everything that's wrong? Absolutely not. Is Nigel Farage going to change some things for the better? I think, to be fair, I've got no time for Nigel Farage, but I think that overall he will at least try to do some things better. And one of them, he's not going to turn the clock back and give us back our old boring white Britain. Absolutely not. He'll do exactly what Giorgia Meloni has done in Italy, which is under cover of a big hoo-ha on the left, opposing his efforts, perhaps successful, to send home a few hundred or a few thousand particularly unpleasant, vile immigrant criminals. Under cover of that, he will bring in hundreds of thousands more Indians and Africans to act as cheap labor and cheap consumers for the big corporations, for big business. That's what he'll do. But, you know, whichever politician we've got in power, they're going to bring in huge numbers of Indians to fill the demographic gap to avoid the collapse of capitalism. That's baked in. At least if Farage was in, we're still going to get the Indians, but we might get a few thousand fewer crazed African and Albanian criminals. He may kick a few of those out. So I think he might be slightly less bad than the others, but that's as good as you're going to get from politicians.
Yeah, exactly that. It does seem an absolute lunacy, because when you sort of look at what we want to do for Britain here, I do have a problem with. I don't like Islam and the radical Islam and the Sharia law and everything else that's coming with it. I don't like these paid agitators who are doing it on behalf of who are, say, taking Israel money and aren't really doing it on behalf of British people. It does seem as though I've either got to be converted in prison to Islam for standing up and making a tweet that I'm going to get locked up for. We can't stop a guy on a train, but we'll send 4 police officers round to somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning because they've done a tweet. And of course, an Israeli-backed hatred of Muslims, which there doesn't seem to be a path for me to walk down.
It is very, very difficult, isn't it? And in fact, there's a third factor here that if you look increasing at the very, very far right, the people who are screaming for remigration when there's no possibility of it happening, because to have remigration, you have to have state power in the hands of people who are prepared to do it, and that isn't going to happen. But they're screaming for this, and they're also saying, so they're also pushing this overall racial hatred. And if you look at their agenda, you will find very, very clearly what I would call the avovification of the far right. They're trying to do the CIA and the deep state of the United States and Britain, the ones who aren't totally on the Zionist agenda. They are trying to manipulate the far right extreme or radical nationalism into doing in the West what they've done in Ukraine, which is becoming the boot boys of their corporate fascism. That's what they're trying to do. And along with that, if you look at, say, the active clubs which are out there attracting youngsters, it sounds fair enough. It all sounds good. You're going to meet up, you're going to do some weight training, you're going to form a tribe with your mates. And then if there's an attack on a train that a couple of you are on, you could stop it or something like that. All sounds fair enough. But if you actually look at what they're saying on their Telegram channels, for more than a few minutes, you will find that they're in favor of Ukraine, which means they're in favor of the global homo side of that appalling brothers war. And you will also find literal Satanism very, very quickly. And these people want death. They want a civil war in this country, not because they want to save our poor country, but because they want just death and destruction, because it's a thing. And you will find the minute you actually research these people, I've got to write about it. I'm going to write about it on Substack fairly soon, actually, because it's quite shocking. The moment you research who is behind this, you find paid CIA informers and Satanist crazies. So there's really no good news in terms of the people out there who are complaining about what's happening. I would say, really, we've got to get real. All these people aren't going to get sent home. The best we're going to get, like I said, is Nigel Farage might send some of them home. So no one is going to protect you on a train from another event like this. So if you're going to go on a train, you've got to carry a big stick. Literally, you've got to carry a hefty walking stick, because a stick in the hands of someone who knows vaguely what they're doing with it will generally beat a knife. It's a simple truth. You cannot rely on them. You either stay off the train and stick to private transport, or you get a job which doesn't involve you going on the train every day to work in London. You either withdraw to somewhere safer, or you withdraw from where the possible dangers are as far as you can, or you carry something with which to defend yourself. Obviously, you can't carry a gun, you can't carry a knife, but you can still carry a stick. And I'm afraid that's where we are. We're in a dangerous, low trust society. So you have to try and adapt your behavior to take that into account. It's up to individuals. Shouldn't be, should be up to the state. But the state has failed us. Now it's up to individuals.
Yeah, I think you're right. Nillis.
Yeah, it seems to me that both sides in this potential civil war are funded by the same resources. It's a bit like the both sides in the Second World War were funded by the same international bankers as well. And there's there's pretty much all we can do is what Warren says is try to vote in independent MPs. I would have thought, because I think reform. Nigel Farage is probably sold out to those forces as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Nillis. Yeah, I know Nillis has just pointed out something that obviously is quite difficult to do. But maybe Nick can let us know, because obviously he knows more about this sort of subject than we do. Is independent MPs for every single constituency a man you trust, a man you know? Is that the way to go? Because the parties, none of the parties seem like they're for the people of Great Britain, Nick.
I'm sorry, it's not. I understand where Nillis is coming from, that it's a great idea in theory.
That's mine.
But if you stand 650 independents in the next general election, you will lose 650 times 1,500, which is the deposit. And assuming you actually want to try and get them elected, you'd also have to give them at least a leaflet for the post office to put up by free post, which will take you an enormous amount of work to do, because the post office doesn't accept just 40,000 leaflets. They have to be broken down into bundles of 100 and wrapped up, every single bundle put into its own elastic bands, and they then have to be boxed for a specific postcode, and these have to be delivered to different places in the constituency. It's an enormous job. So you will be spending, once you pay for the leaflets and the lost deposit, you'll be spending 650 by £3,000 or £4,000, which is an awful lot of money. Perhaps someone here can do the maths. 650 by 4,000. Let's hear what it is.
Yeah,
it's a lot. But it's an awful lot of money, and they will all lose their deposits. At the very most, if the leaflet comes from a good, traditionalist, nationalist, patriotic, common sense position, all it will do, each of them will get about 90 votes, and in 3 or 4 constituencies, reform will be beaten by the Labour Party or the Lib Dems by about 50 votes. So you would have cost reform 5 or 6 seats. So you'll have even worse people. Whatever Farage is, most of the people, at least half, probably more, of the candidates who will be standing for reform at the next general election will be thoroughly decent people. Some of them will be failed recycled Tories who are the scum of the earth, but some of them will be decent people. And your independent candidates will cost and they will cost you 650 times £4,000. Now, 650 times £4,000, if it could be raised, put into things that are useful.
2,600,000.
Right, thank you. 2,600,000.
Thank you, Mo.
Right. Now, thank you very much for that. Right, it's a staggering sum of money. One, the patriotic movement in this country, I don't believe can raise that sort of money. But if you can, then raise it and put it into, for instance, lawfare for judicial review of every single council and government decision you don't like. Put it into that. Use it to fund a central office of people who do nothing with their working time except put in FOI requests, freedom of information requests, to things against all the government and quasi-government bodies which are doing all the things which are bad for our society. You could put a little bit of it into, this is something for parents and grandparents to consider. If you've got youngsters in your family who their parents, you or their parents, are thinking, I used to be in the Cubs or the Brownies or the Girl Guides or the Boy Scouts, but I couldn't now put my children or grandchildren into a system, the Scout movement, which is now riddled, utterly riddled from the very bottom to the very top with pederasts, perverts and people who believe that kids can and should change their gender. To put children into the scalp movement today is an act of child abuse. And if you're a nationalist, a patriotic Christian, it's an act of suicide. It's blowing up, it's shooting your own future in the head. But if you can actually afford to raise even a tenth of 2,600,000, you could use that to fund the website and the badges and the training and so on for an independent, patriotic, non-PC scout movement. There's so many things you can do with 2,600,000.
Talking about this to you, Nick, we've got a major problem in terms of what we can carry and can't carry for our own safety, as you were just saying there. You can carry a walking stick. People are advocating for, pepper spray used to be available and everything else. I always found a Jif lemon works really well with the squeezy one in the bottle. And of course, I'm carrying it. Why? Because I'm taking it to a friend's. Why are you carrying this, sir? Well, I'm taking it to a friend's because he hasn't got any lemon. It does seem, we were saying this, Nick, is that the whole of society and law seems to now be against you if you defend yourself rather than, the guy who's doing the attacking. That cannot be right, can it?
Absolutely not right. I mean, it's a fundamental breach of our real, not human rights as in the liberal version, but actually our rights as sensible adult human beings, and especially as able-bodied men. It's a disgraceful attack on our rights to defend ourselves, our loved ones, and innocent members of the public who happen to be near us. Where the media and even the politicians will still praise a have-a-go hero, especially, of course, if he's not actually an indigenous Brit, then it's particularly heroic, as in what appears to be the very brave man on the train which stopped at Huntingdon. Fair enough. He's some sort of immigrant. He saved people's lives. That's good. But any have-a-go hero, the moment the police look at them, they're looking, did this man overreact? Has he committed an offence? Should we arrest him? Because the whole of the elite, from the top politicians through to the very newest trained cop, is to maintain the state's monopoly on any kind of coercion, which is fair enough if the state is competent at using coercion and violence to defend decent citizens. And very clearly, the state we have now, and it goes back, you can't just blame Starmer and Co, because the Tories were responsible and in charge when it was every bit as bad 2 years ago. The state has abdicated from the use of force and coercion against bad people in area after area. So there's this gap. And where there's a gap, where the state won't use coercion, ordinary citizens should be able to. Because we're stopped from doing so by the law, the only people who fill the gap for violence are criminal scum. So therefore, society gets more and more violent. It's absolutely wrong, but again, and come back, there's actually no point really complaining about it. There's two things we can do. One, as we were saying beforehand, and as clearly as a lot of your listeners have got, you have to be prepared to defend yourself in whatever way you can. And although you cannot carry anything like a weapon, you certainly can't carry pepper spray. They class that if the cops are using it against people who are complaining about lockdown, that's absolutely fine. You use it against a criminal and you will be arrested under the Firearms Act. Yes. So you can't carry that. But indeed, you can carry a Vicks nasal spray or a lemon or a perfume spray. If you're caught with a perfume spray, you have to say, well, when I went out this morning, I was identifying as a woman. Yeah. So fair enough, carry a perfume. So you can carry some sort of spray. You can carry some sort of stick. You can carry a pen, which now if you use it against someone in the street when they haven't attacked you at all, or even if they just spat at you or something and you poke their eye out, you're going to go to prison for it. But if someone is trying to kill you with a knife, then you are entitled to shove that pen through their eyeball and kill them. So you can carry sorts of weapons like that. It's terrible that we have to talk about that's all that people can now do. There is one more thing I think they can do. And this is true in Britain, it's true everywhere where there's a populist insurgency. And that obviously is what the reform thing is. If reform forms a government, They will have to do some things which actually go along with what the public wants. Otherwise, they'll be out on their ear very, very quickly. And also, some of those some of those people who are not from the party political system will be decent, and they'll be wanting to think, well, what can I do? What sort of laws can I push my party, my government, to put into practice? Or, for that matter, what can a group of us get together as a backbench proposal and try to shove through because we've got a huge majority? And we cannot expect Reform MPs to come up with a policy to return Britain to being 95% ethnically British, because that would involve the collapse of the entire economy for various reasons, not least external pressure, and it's demographically impossible, I'm afraid. That would be revolutionary. You'd have to say, you know what, the fiat money banking system, the whole of capitalism, we're going to blow it up. We don't care, we want our country back. And we don't care all the poverty and chaos that goes with it. That a revolutionary nationalist party might do. A party like Reform will not. But a party like Reform might bring in a law which allowed people, for instance, to carry pepper spray as long as they only use it against criminals. Why not? They might bring in a law which says that if you actually use a knife in the way that these criminal scum did, even if you don't kill anyone, you will be hung. But we might just conceivably get a death penalty out of them. I think not, because the weight of the liberal opinion is too strongly against it. But if they try that, and absent that, at least get our right to carry some, basically, probably non-lethal weapons. What they should say is everyone's got the right to a concealed firearm. As long as you're an adult and without a criminal conviction, you can carry a concealed firearm. And in the states in America where people are allowed to carry concealed firearms, especially if you take out the criminality of a couple of ethnic groups, the gun crime of European Americans is actually about the same as ours. So you could arm our people, decent people, and it wouldn't make a difference. It would just mean that some criminals would get shot. It wouldn't be only criminals who are armed. But realistically, that's not going to happen. And if you ask for that, you get nothing. But if we, the people, pressure our local Reform MPs when we get them, look, we don't really care what you do about all sorts of things, but give us the right to carry pepper spray to protect ourselves from these murderous scumbags who are on the loose, we might just get that. That's better than nothing. That's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, exactly that. I will be bringing out a Warren Thornton pen. It's about 2 foot long. But Robert was waiting very patiently to ask you a question. Robert.
Hello, Warren.
Hello.
I sent you an email with a very cogent questioning article about the Huntingdon train. Apparently, a few months before, there was an exactly the same exercise carried out under Operation Plot.
Wow.
And it raised a lot of questions. There is very little actual evidence of what's going on. It says that it's really a false flag by the government.
So let's ask Nick if this is a possibility. Thank you very much for that, Robert. I haven't received that email, but I'll have a look for it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has to be a possibility, but there's a big but here. Most things which appear on anything which appears in the mass media, we automatically disbelieve. Right? Yes. Anything liberal leftist comes on the mass media, we automatically think that's bullshit. Anything which appears on alternative media, which fits in with the pattern which we're beginning to see, we seize on it, we assume it's true.
Yes.
And very often it is not.
Very
often
true.
It's not. Not least for the fact that virtually all of social media is now, if you've got a significant reach, it's monetized.
Yes.
Monetized. Whether it's on Twitter, on YouTube, on whatever it is, it's monetized. Therefore, there's an incentive to people to come up with things which attract attention and get them reposted, get them retweeted. And purely inventing stuff like that is one of the best ways to do it. Most of it is hogwash. It simply isn't true. And I've looked, I can't think offhand at any examples of this because I've given up looking. Generally, I find that just as if the media tell us it's a lie, if it's also on the media, so on alternative media, and it goes to the idea of false flags, it's probably a lie as well. Because to carry out a false flag like that, you have to have a very large number of people involved. In a criminal conspiracy, which any one of them could blow up, and everyone involved is at least going to go to court, if not go to prison. And if they're politicians, etc., their career is going to be destroyed. And if they're in the mainstream media, then probably their career is going to be destroyed. The only people who might get away with it are actually members of the Labour Party, Labour government, who apparently can get away with anything. But for anybody else, no, it simply can't happen. And I think a lot of it's, why are people surprised that people of African descent who've been brought up on a lifelong diet of white people all being responsible for slavery and for oppressing them, and who take industrial quantities of high-powered skunk cannabis, why would anyone be surprised that they then get on a train and start stabbing white people? You simply don't need some deep conspiracy by the state to account for it. Absolutely not. It's as plain as the nose on my face, which is quite large, that's what people like this do, especially when they know that if they are caught for it, they'll get a slap on the wrist, or they'll be simply in a cozy prison, which is run by people like them anyway, and there's simply no problem whatsoever. So I don't think this is problem, reaction, solution. This is the consequence of living in a multicultural utopia where they basically legalize drugs for many, many years. Get used to it, because there's plenty more coming where this is. And if you try and explain it away as all being the fault of this all-powerful government and so on, then you miss the real factor, which is keep the hell away from areas which are multiracial, because they're bloody dangerous. And you also, if you think they're so powerful, they're doing all of this, and they've got everyone absolutely conned. If they're that powerful, how on earth can we fight them in any way, shape or form? So it's so demotivating that I actually think some of it actually comes from very sinister forces who want us all terrified and frightened and talking giant conspiracies, because it leaves us powerless and makes us look barking mad. I understand why good people often believe this stuff, but my counsel is be very, very wary indeed.
Fair dues. Robert was waiting for another question. One more from Robert.
Not a question, but I agree with Mr. Griffiths that the only area we can expect anything from reform is the number of councillors that they already have and haven't demoted and put in old Tories. And if they get enough people, there will be some independent thought amongst them. I hope that would, as Mr. Griffith suggest, start to break up the Reform Party.
Absolutely. So can I just come in on that, Warren? Just briefly, I wrote about this a couple of weeks on Substack. I write a lot on Substack now. It's Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale, and it's a brilliant platform. There's some really good people coming up with really good ideas on Substack. But I wrote a couple of weeks ago as part of a series, which I hope in due course to become a book, What is to be Done, looking at what genuine nationalists can do under the circumstances in which we're in. And one of the first things in those, I believe that, and this actually goes across the board for the whole of Western Europe and the United States, everywhere where you now have populist parties coming through, they are going to produce large numbers of MPs, and especially, as Robert says, councillors, who actually are quite independent, decent people, and who are basically fresh to politics. There's an ideological vacuum in these parties, and that'll tend to stay, because if they actually develop ideology and principles, they then can't be all things to all men, which is part of their electoral appeal. If you come down, if Reform got into its ideas and so on and started training all its people, it would either be training them to be basically ultra right-wing Tories, privatise everything, and that might go down quite well, and do away almost with taxes, or cut it to 10%. That might go down with upper middle England quite well, but it would lose them the votes of large numbers of working people. Or they can go down a patriotic socialist route, the old Labour Party that your grandparents used to vote for. This was the BNP position, and say, right, we're going to renationalise the railways. We're going to renationalise the utilities because they're natural monopolies and so on. And that, of course, then would upset the Thatcherite Tories. So they're not going to do that. So at the heart of reform, there will remain this ideological vacuum. And one of the things which I'm proposing is that we need a small but funded group of people who produce on a regular basis, perhaps once every 6 months is all needed, a slender book of nationalist ideas and practical things that reform councillors and MPs can do to make the country a bit better, and raise enough money to get this into the hands of all their people. Basically, in order to get where he is, Farage stood on the shoulders of me and the BNP activists and reached for where he is now. Because it was only because the elite, and especially the BBC, was so terrified of us that they promoted Farage. And what I was saying in this Substack series, now it's our turn to stand on his shoulders, and by standing on his shoulders, to get genuine, sensible, well thought out, practical nationalist ideas going into the heads and the hearts of reform people. And either, if that happens, some of them, of course, will say no. It'll happen with some of them, and either they can then do things quietly, which make things a little bit better, or they'll get thrown out of reform, but they'll still be elected members. And as Robert says, at that stage, you'll start to get some independent, sane thought, which precisely because it's a little bit like the emperor has no clothes, that old story. When the entire political elite are going along with the liberal insanity, then it's very easy for them to carry on. You've only, I think, got to have a few people actually speaking truth to power and talking common sense, and it becomes much harder for the others to carry on imposing nonsense. So there's plenty we can do, and that's one of the things that I think could be really effective.
Yeah. Right, Robert, one more question, because there are some other things we need to discuss with Nick. We've only got him for an hour. Robert. Yes,
by all means. Well, there with reform, there is the dog that hasn't barked. They reform have not asked Starmer to ask for the 5 billion back from Ukraine and from Israel. Why haven't reform mentioned this at all? It needs being spoken by somewhere. From somewhere, something like the Light magazine would be ideal to shout this out. Reform, and Farage won't, since he's been bought by Israel and the arms manufacturers.
Let's let Nick answer the question.
For that matter, it's a very good point, Robert. For that matter, has Farage asked for the 50 billion back, which Britain has paid the European Union since we left? Because it's a staggering sum of money. It's 10 times. You're absolutely right to complain about what they're giving Israel and Ukraine, especially because in both cases, our taxes are being used to fund the evil side, the particularly bad side. No sides are good in war, actually, but the worst of the sides in two very dangerous and terrible conflicts. But in each case, if 5 billion is the correct figure, it's a tenth of what we've given to the European Union since 17.4 million Brits voted to leave. And as far as I know, Farage hasn't asked about that. Now, to be fair, I try to be fair to Nigel Farage, I have to grit my teeth to do it. It may be because he and their little clique of MPs in Parliament are raising this question, are putting Starmer and co on the spot. But if the media don't report it, then it effectively doesn't happen. It's the tree that falls down in the forest in the night. And so that may be the case. They might be asking. I can't credit why on earth Farage wouldn't ask about the 50 million that's gone to Brussels. I can well understand absolutely why he wouldn't dare to ask about the money that's gone to Israel. The money for Ukraine would be a little bit easier if it wasn't for the fact that one of the attacks against Farage that the whole of the political elite have used, and he's clearly very scared of, is the idea that he's Putin's puppet, which I don't believe, but nevertheless they ask that in order to frighten him away. And Farage, being a very clever, very skilled, very sneaky politician, sees pain there and moves away from it. And that's that's what's going on. So absolutely, he will never touch the Israeli thing, obviously. He knows where the donors are. He knows where the media support comes from. He might touch the Ukraine thing, but I think he's scared of that smear. If he won't even ask about the 50 billion to Europe, then you have to concede actually that basically he's bloody useless, which is hard to believe, or for one reason or other in someone else's pocket, and the whole thing is a shadow boxing safety valve, which is one conspiracy theory which I am prepared to entertain as having potentially a lot of basis in fact.
So let me ask you a question then, because we've got you for another 10 minutes or so. Now, I want something that was pertaining to something that was levelled at you when you were in the British National Party, and what you were saying there about Putin's puppet, because I'm going to show you a video, Nick, and it is quite a nasty one. But there is, you'll bear with me, we've got two videos to show you. Then I've got something to show you that is incredibly shocking. So this is an incredibly shocking video of Ukrainian people who want to walk towards the Russian lines, and they are literally cut off by a Ukrainian drone, which then decides, because it can't get them to turn back, it's going to kill them. Have a little look at this, and be aware, anybody who's watching, if you are of a sensitive nature, the next 3 minutes you might not want to watch this. Now, first of all, we've got that. And of course, as horrible as that was, and then the Ukrainians actually got hold of the footage and then tried to doctor it, and they were found doctoring it so that they could blame the Russians. On top of that, Nick, and I'm going to put this up here, something you were accused very much of being a Nazi and everything else in the British National Party. And we got the emblem of the Azov battalion, which pretty much, the Azov has grown to about 330,000 members, and he's now indoctrinating schools and everything else, which is to do also, if we say the word, we get banned on YouTube. So we're going to say the nasty black sun, and the emblem of the SS division, Dash Reich. So if we take that is the Azov banner that's been touted around at football and everything else. And then we have this, Nick, which is quite, I find absolutely stunning. This is Zelensky and Sersky, the people in charge of Ukraine, currently doing this.
Воїни, маю честь нагородити вас, подякувати за службу, вам, вашим родинам за те, що підтримують вас. Дякуємо за захист нашої держави. Бережіть себе і бережіть своїх побратимів. Напевно, це найголовніше. Ті, хто поруч з тобою, дуже віримо.
We've got this that is happening at the moment. Now, this is where we get to your relevant bit, Nick. You were very much accused of being Nazis and National Front and everything else, and it was thrown around left, right, and centre. And yet we have this 100-year partnership with Starmer and these people who are carrying out these sorts of atrocities. And then on top of that, which is absolutely staggering, and I think, I don't know if you've actually seen this, but it is an amazing thing. We have this 100-year partnership where our money is being used to fund the Ukrainian Youth Organization of Great Britain in this country. And we have, let's have a little look. We've even got the nice khaki brown uniforms there, the brown shirt type uniforms. Quite incredible, Nick. And of course, when we talk about, everybody, the membership structure, our branches and everything else, we have this isn't a little thing. This is Ashton, Bradford, Bolton, Coventry, Derby, Leicester, London, Manchester, Nottingham, Rochdale, Stockport, Waltham Cross, and Wolverhampton, and another 7 or 8 of these now coming up. We're actually doing what you might call a nasty, shall we call it, Hitler Youth Camp in Great Britain. We've got 10 of these. This seems to be a pretty real thing against some horrible people that we're going to now breed for the next 100 years, this sort of hatred towards Russia, and get these people, shall we say, I mean, there is government money behind this. What on earth are we doing, Nick?
Well, while that appalling piece, the video of the civilians being murdered was showing, I scribbled down a couple of words, actually. I wrote down Dark Sun, Azov, and satanic neo-Nazism. So we're absolutely on the same page here. What's going on here? This is an exact mirror image. It's from the same CIA and deep state playbook. And here we're talking real, dirty, genuine conspiracy stuff. This is exactly what they did to weaponize radical Islam, to weaponize Wahhabism. They encouraged Wahhabism, which is a form of Islam which most ordinary Muslims reject. It's a fundamentalist form, but the American, British, French, European Union, and Israeli deep states deliberately encouraged this from Afghanistan onwards to weaponize Islam as a weapon for their foreign policy against the Soviets in Afghanistan, against Gaddafi in Libya, against Assad in Syria, against Russia in Chechnya and so on. They weaponized that. And this is the weaponization of neo-Nazism in exactly the same way by the same people for the same ends, which I talked about briefly at the beginning of this show. So we come full circle here. That they're doing this deliberately. There will be, just as there was then, once you weaponize radical Islam, as Assad warned, he said, terrorism isn't a scorpion that you can keep in your pocket, and use against the others. If you try to, it's going to sting you as well. You get blowback. So the Manchester mass murderer, the Manchester Arena mass murderer, was encouraged and sent, courtesy of the British state, from the radical Islamists who were based in exile in Manchester to go and fight in Libya against Gaddafi. Then he came back and murdered children in Manchester. You get blowback, and we will get even more blowback from this Ukrainian neo-Nazism, which, as you say, sorry, Nazism, just a slip of the tongue there, which, as you say, Starmer and all the rest of them are promoting. Farage just about objects to it, but hasn't got the courage to say. And this is going to produce a similar wave of terrorism against ordinary people in Central and Western Europe for a whole generation, because Ukraine is going to lose that war. Those people will feel betrayed. They will feel stabbed in the back by the West, and they will come to the West as refugees and primarily earn their living by being involved in semi-political narco gangs. So there's going to be all sorts of trouble from this. One last thing here, the dark sun, it's very, very interesting that just as they weaponized, in weaponizing Wahhabism, they weaponized something which is so deep and dark and thoroughly evil that the beheading of people comes just naturally to it. So that dark sun started with Himmler, but it's become the emblem not just of ordinary neo-Nazis, but actually of people who are literally inspired by Satanism. And
yes,
the neo-Nazi element, which now dominates the Ukrainian armed forces, thanks to Azov, some of the people that first came up with its ideas and so on, when it was just small gangs, they, and especially their Russian sympathizers, the ones who invaded part of Russia on their behalf with NATO weapons a few months ago, they actually started, whereas nationalists in the West in recent years, the good ones, have been doing things such as helping homeless people, because our people shouldn't be homeless, cold and wet and dying on our streets when all sorts of others are being put into houses and hotels at our expense. So genuine nationalists go out and do soup kitchen runs and so on, and get sleeping bags and shelter for people, homeless veterans on the streets. The Russian and Ukrainian neo-Nazis who are behind this thing, the Dark Sun people, they cut their teeth going out and beating up and murdering homeless people on the streets on the basis that they are scum, subhuman scum who should be killed, and because it's a sacrifice to the forces of darkness. So just as Wahhabism is something very evil, weaponized by the deep states of the West and Israel, so too this latest thing, this satanic neo-Nazism, is even worse. They know it, but they're still promoting it. It's really, really wicked.
it's a very dark thing. And when you turn around and tell these people, we're letting somebody in, when you turn around and tell these people that very, very simply what they do is they use NGOs like the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA, to overthrow places like Ukraine. And in fact, you try and turn around and say, look, this was the whole reason why Russia stepped into Crimea, because Victoria Nuland and a gang from the National Endowment for Democracy, who were there handing out loaves of bread and everything else, along with John McCain, actually overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine simply because they didn't like the idea that they were not against Russia. We'll let Nilis in a second, but just let me get your thoughts on that, Nick.
Well, you're absolutely right, Warren, and obviously I've got to go pretty soon. So one thing I'd like to get across, because it goes back to my political career and so on. So while I was in the European Parliament, I was part of a pan-European nationalist alliance, and at one stage, just before the Maidan coup 2014, we were in touch with the Ukrainian nationalists. They got in touch with us, said, we're nationalists, we'd like to work with you and so on. So we had them very briefly in our alliance, and within weeks, they were, having got involved in an alliance which included Romanians and Hungarians as very important partners, their gangs on the streets of the Romanian bit of Ukraine and in the Hungarian bit, which is occupied Ukraine, they were attacking the symbols and the memorials of the minority, and they were saying, it's not just the Russians, it's not just the Jews, it's not just the blacks we hate. Also we have to cleanse our land of the Romanians and the Hungarians because they're scum too. And we had to expel those people. So I've actually sat down and talked with the people who form Sloboda Party, who've been involved in Azov and so on at very high level. I've sat down and spoken to them initially as new colleagues and friends, and have found they are the most unreasonable, vicious, unrealistic psychopaths I have ever had the misfortune to come across. And these are the people who, for the last few years, have been the political commissars of the Ukrainian army, which is only still functioning thanks to vast amounts of our taxes and so much of our own weaponry that, for instance, Britain no longer has any howitzers in our army because we've given them all away.
Yeah, exactly that. Let's get into very, very quickly. One last question from Nilis before we let you go, Nick. Thank you so much for your time today. Nilis.
Yeah, I lived in Egypt for 28 years, and I met a very interesting Lebanese Orthodox monk, and he was saying that Wahhabism and extreme Judaism of the Talmud were very much the same thing, and even Jews in their encyclopedia said it. He also told me that the leaders that the West put into the Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and the UAE were Jews who had converted many years ago, centuries ago, to Islam. And it's interesting that they both Wahhabism and the extreme Judaism have satanic undertones.
Okay, let's let Nick answer that. We are joined by Paul Brooker from Viral TV and Paul Brooker TV. We will just let Nick answer that, and then we will let him go.
I've heard exactly the same from various Muslims as well, particularly Shia, but also some Sunni as well, who'll say the same thing, that this extremism is not organic, it's not from them. I suppose in a way you'd expect them to say that, wouldn't you? But when they're saying it, and especially when the Shia are saying it about Sunnis, of course they hate each other, and when also Christians in the Middle East are saying it as well, if that's what we are being told, then you've got to assume this probably is the case, because this isn't one little group with a vested interest coming up with something. It's people across the board from very different backgrounds. And also, of course, you will find exactly the same thing. For instance, if you go and read the UNS review online, written or edited by Ron Unz, who's a Jew who lives in the United States, and he provides a wonderful platform there for various very decent Jews, Gilad Atzmon and others, and they also say exactly the same thing. So you've got Christians in the Middle East, you've got decent Western Jews, and you've got Muslims all saying this Wahhabism is something deeply evil, which has very fake origins. And it's rather like, again, if you check the history of the massacre of the Armenians by the Young Turks, you look into that, you will find the Young Turks were not Turkish at all. They were Jews from a satanic sect, which was so satanic and evil that all mainstream Jews would be very happy, always were, and still would be, to tell you these people are not they're not us. This is a satanic sect. And certainly, if you look at the people behind Wahhabism, you will find that same kind of satanic evil. All peoples and all the peoples of the book actually have produced people who are thoroughly evil. In the case of Christians, you've got Christian Zionism, which comes not in its origins actually from the idea that Oliver Cromwell let the Jews back into Britain, so it's all them again. It's not, Oliver Cromwell did that, and feminism, another thing which people blame on these people, also came from this same source. The ultimate culprits for this were the Quakers.
Yes.
And Quakerism, people think it's just something sort of rather bonkers, which is gone. If you look at any far left organization, you will either find this kind of radical left-wing Jews that Charlie Kirk had just noticed before he was killed, or you will find things like the Roundtree Trust. It goes back to the Quakers. So this is a heresy out of Christianity. All the peoples of the book have created heretics and people inspired in the end by something very, very dark. And they, regardless of where they come from, they are a menace to all of us. And they tend to, between themselves, use the same pot. That's the way things go.
Yeah.
Really interesting point from the guys. Thank you very much. As you know, I've got to go. Thank you
Yep.
very much,
Nick,
Warren,
where can people
for providing
find
the
you?
platform. People can find me on Twitter, Nick Griffin BTP. That's Bravo Tango Papa, which stands for Beyond the Pale. And you'll also find me on Substack at Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. If you're not into Substack, then it's a free app, very easy to load, very easy to use, and some fantastic writing on it, and also a fair bit from me. Thank you, Warren. Good night.
Fantastic.
I hope to see you and all you people again fairly soon.
Thanks a lot, Nick. And we'll
Thanks
be
a lot.
second half right after this.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all.